recharge, refresh, restart. This is the Laura Coates Show on POTUS. Here's your host, Laura Coates.
Hey, welcome back to the Laura Coates Show here on Sirius XM POTUS. I'm so glad that you're here right now. Joining us is Rabbi Rick Jacobs, president of the Union for Reform Judaism, the most powerful force in North American Jewish life as described. The URJ leads the largest and most diverse Jewish movement in North America, reaching more than 1.5 million people through nearly 850 congregations, 15 overnight camps, the Reform Teen Youth Movement, NFTY, and the Religious Action Center in Washington, D.C. The rabbi joins us now. Rabbi Rick Jacobs, welcome and good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Good to be with you, Laura.
There's been a lot of conversations ongoing since October 7th, and every day that goes by is just heart-wrenching to think about those who remain in captivity, also the death toll, what the impact has been on the community in Israel, in Gaza, on civilians, across the globe, people watching with just such a disbelief that this is still happening and could still happen in any country in the world. There's been a new statement in terms of the conversations to possibly broker a ceasefire and release the remaining hostages at the very least. What has been your take on how that's been going?
Well, as you described it, Laura, it has been an excruciating last 4.5 months. And, for anybody with a heart to see the devastation, the massacre on October 7th, and Israel's justified war against Hamas, not against the Palestinian people, and to see the innocent Palestinians suffering because of Hamas's use of human shields, it breaks the heart. So the question today is, where are we going? And as you described, over 130 hostages are still being kept by Hamas in Gaza, and Israel is trying very, very hard. There's a deal on the table. Hamas is deliberating whether to accept it or not, which would return a good number of those hostages in exchange for a ceasefire for about 6 weeks and the release of Palestinian security prisoners in Israeli jails. The truth is there's a lot of speculation about what comes next. What is the goal? What is the day after? What is the better future for the region?
And when you think about what that looks like and what that goal is, the one thing is the ceasefire and the return of hostages, but the impact between the relationships, is there a way to course correct?
Well, I think people of goodwill have to always think of what is the better tomorrow. The Secretary of State, Blinken, is in the Middle East as we speak. He met yesterday with MBS in Saudi Arabia. One of the big dilemmas between the Biden administration and the U.S. the Israeli leadership is the question of 2 states for 2 peoples, something that's been in the air and discussion for over 2 decades. And everybody in Israel knows that there's no chance that tomorrow, next month, or next year there will be 2 states for 2 peoples. But Prime Minister Netanyahu said there's no chance for that to happen, not under his watch. He will block it at every point. I think people who are looking say there's got to be a different future. And somehow today, Israelis and Palestinians can't live side by side without deep fear on the part of Israel that another October 7th would happen. But we can't just, in a military way, keep hunkering down and saying this is going to lead to some better tomorrows. But there are some really tough choices that have to be made. And I think in Israel, even the war cabinet, there's some, kind of a little bit of discussion about what are the legitimate aims we can aim for. There was a trial in the Hague a couple of weeks ago, bringing Israel up on the charge of genocide. It is a really concerning moment, and I think for the U.S. administration, it's been unbelievably supportive of Israel. They also are wanting to see what is the next step beyond this war.
You've made some policy recommendations in particular to address this new outlook on the Israel-Hamas war that offers perhaps a clear articulation of the movement's values and positions on the Israel-Palestine conflict and also a renewal of your own commitments. Let's walk through a little bit of what these recommendations are. One includes recognizing that Israel's security and well-being are enhanced, you say, by a future that includes a peaceful Palestinian state.
I think that is just clear. There can't be simply Israel military rule over Gaza, the West Bank, over millions of Palestinians, and to think that's a recipe for long-term stability and security. That doesn't mean, again, we're naively suggesting that tomorrow this independence for Palestine is in the cards, but there has to be a pathway. We have to remove, as our statement said, the barriers. For example, the proliferation of settlements, the incitement on the part of some very extreme settlers and extreme voices in the current government calling for, frankly, Palestinians in Gaza to be literally transferred out and for Israelis to settle Gaza. These are the things that block any possibility that there's a better future. And our statement calls out what those actually are in specific terms. Again, not to, put on rose-colored glasses and see only, joy here. There's real pain, but this pain has to have a limited duration. The Middle East has been awash in violence for so long, and this current war has been deadly. And I think that, for the largest movement in North American Jewish community, we want to be part of a better solution. And I think some of the specifics, the humanitarian aid has to get to Gazans. Yes, the Gazans are being, in a sense, prisoners of Hamas's ideology, which wants to destroy Israel. But they got to be fed. They need basic, medical supplies. So again, it's looking at this in a more total way, but also in a way that builds slowly and steadily the possibility that there are going to be better times ahead.
You've also recommended, of course, some way to address the settler violence against Palestinians. I mean, the violence of October 7th, unconscionable would be the understatement of a lifetime. But you also seek to have peace and nonviolence against Palestinians.
Yeah, let's be clear. The violence by the settlers in the West Bank is nothing compared to what happened on October 7th. Let me say that really loudly, really clearly. However, Israel has to be able to curb those very extreme individuals in the West Bank who are fomenting tension, who are, they're Palestinians harvesting their olive crops, and some of these extreme settlers go in and not just disrupt but harm. That's not part of the future that we're building. And scary, Laura, is that some of the most extreme voices are coming from the actual cabinet. And that is deeply concerning. So it's not just a very fringe group on the very outskirts of Israeli leadership. Some of those voices, some of those people like Itamar Ben-Gvir, the Minister of Public Security, or Bezalel Smotrich, who's the finance minister, some of those very extreme voices are sitting at the cabinet table. That is very concerning for anybody who wants to see a different tomorrow.
You also recommend halting the construction of West Bank settlements and rejecting any Jewish resettlement in Gaza.
Yeah, first of all, the idea of resettling Gaza is just, it's to me unimaginable, and frankly, I think to many, if not most people who look at the situation, that's not what the Gazan conflict needs. It doesn't need more Israeli settlers. It needs some kind of negotiated settlement. It needs some kind of governance structure in Gaza to rule over the people with some kind of ability to take care of basic needs. And the West Bank, the idea of proliferating settlements is also one of those obstacles to a future Palestinian state. If they're literally only pouring in new Israeli settlements amidst some of the Palestinian communities, it does foreclose that possibility. So these are very specific things. And by the way, we've been strong and clear about these for several decades, including the possibility that Israel has toyed with annexing the West Bank to Israel. And I would just also want to connect in our statement that what happened yesterday with Secretary Blinken in Saudi Arabia is incredibly game-changing. It's a transformation. Saudi Arabia wants to normalize relationship with Israel, and in doing so, it wants to know that there's a path towards Palestinian independence. And that would change the entire balance of power in the Middle East, away from Iran towards a more moderate set of countries that want to create a definite interconnectedness between Israel and the Gulf states. That is one of the transformations that a Palestinian state would happily and very, very welcoming bring a new era into existence.
This has been really helpful to think about, and of course there's a lot on the table for those who are trying diplomatically to get a negotiated solution, and time is of the essence. It always has been of the essence, and now with the hostages still in captivity, the death toll still rising in Gaza, it is as urgent as ever. Rabbi Rick Jacobs, thank you so much for your time.